soy la directora de la colaborativa y es un honor tener al juez Gans en nuestra comunidad. Para los que no saben, este juez fue el que luchó con Chelsea y la colaborativa en expandir los servicios judiciales para las cortes en Massachusetts. Nosotros teníamos una batalla legislativa donde queríamos cambiar la ley y este juez fue el que cogió esta batalla y la hizo una realidad. Estamos sumamente honrados de tenerlo en nuestra ciudad. So it is my pleasure to introduce Chief Justice Gans. You have been with us fighting for our housing court expansion. We all had the experience of seeing you in action and advocating for something that Chelsea didn't have. As a community that is a community of renters, a community that is very low income and poor, we needed to have a judge that took the initiative to make this happen, not only for Chelsea, but for 80 other cities and towns that didn't have housing court. We worked very hard with you. We saw you fight for our causes, and we're delighted that you're back in Chelsea doing what you do best, representing the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We hope that in our new fight, the right to counsel fight, we're hoping that you join us again in that great endeavor, and you will hear from members of our community of the issues that we're facing now. So it's my honor to have you in my great city of Chelsea. Muchísimas gracias y bienvenido. Gracias.
Good evening. My name is Joan Brummel, and I'm president of Chelsea Black Community, and I want to welcome you, Honorable Chief Justice Gans, to our great city of Chelsea. A population of 40,227 in a city which runs only about 1.86 square miles. So we're actually the second smallest in the state in terms of area. Chelsea is a city where you will greet our city manager at our local Bachata Rosa, our chief of police at the local fitness center, and our superintendent in schools, you'll sit next to her during Sunday Mass. Although we are a city of many immigrants and our schools strive to teach a transient student population, we too are a city of generations, a community of nonprofit organizations providing services to our residents with disadvantages. Tonight, we are here to discuss our concerns such as recidivism, opiate addiction, homelessness, domestic abuse, immigration, to name a few. I thank you, Honorable Chief Justice Gans, for coming and joining us today to have a conversation, to discuss our concerns, and I hope together we can find recommendations and ultimately solutions. Thank you and welcome. Good evening. Before opening in prayer, I just would like to thank you and welcome you to what I call our historic church that's been here since 1853. And God is doing mighty things. A church that has gone through two fires, and one of them was the Great Fire in Chelsea. And we were raised out of the ashes. So thanks be to God for that. So if you would like to stand, please, as we open in prayer, as we are accustomed to. And if you are not a religious person or do not believe, I would ask you to stand in respect for the house that you are in tonight. Let us bow our heads and pray. Almighty and loving God, you who are creator and savior of humanity, in the midst of this gathering, we invite your Holy Spirit, Lord, that you move over us, that you move around us, and that you move inside of us. We pray that your Holy Spirit will enlighten us as we will open our hearts and minds so that we can hear and respond to the conversation of those who have gathered here tonight. I pray that we can speak in peace, in love, in unity, with compassion, and with mercy. That tonight we can step away from the anger, the pain, the hate, the discouragement, and the violence and the oppression that constantly surrounds us. Let your Spirit move in this place, O God. Hear the cry that we have for justice and for peace. I thank you, God, for all those who have come together and have worked to organize this meeting this evening. Lord, I thank you for the agencies, the city officials, the city and state police, the planners, the organizers, Pastor Sandra, the Chief Justice, Lord. Thank you for all of them. And a special prayer, oh God, for our Chief Justice, Lord, who has been so helpful already to this community. Yeah. A man who enforces the rule of law. So God, we ask and we pray that he can hear what's in our hearts and that he will hear us with an open mind, with a heart of compassion and a heart of mercy. And that together we can come together and plan for the benefit of the community we all serve. Padre, en esta noche yo te alabo y te bendigo y te doy gracias porque tú eres el Salvador de la humanidad. Te doy gracias porque estamos reunidos aquí, oh Señor, para hablar. Te pedimos que en esta noche, Señor, tú quites el coraje, el enojo de nuestros corazones y que podamos oír, que podamos hablar, Señor, con compasión y oír la queja de nuestra comunidad. Abre tus oídos, oh Dios, y óyenos y trae justicia a esta comunidad. Gracias, Señor, por el jefe judicial, que tú lo bendigas, que tú abras su corazón, Señor, y que lo oiga a su pueblo. En el nombre de Jesús oramos. In the name of Jesus we pray. And the people of God said, Amen. Amen. God bless you.
Good evening. Good evening. I am Reverend Sandra Whitley, the pastor of People's AME Church, and we share this space with Pastor Myrna and the New Life United Methodist Church. We are so happy, we're so glad, we're so excited about what is about to happen on this evening. And so we want to take the time to just acknowledge those who are here that are representatives from our community. We have, has it already been introduced, our city manager, Tom Ambrosino. So if you could just stand up and just wave your hand and let us know that. There you go. So we got waves from the young people. Yes, good. And we have our Chelsea Police Department Chief Brian Keyes, who's always hospitable. We feel protected. And then you have heard from our Chelsea Collaborative Executive Director, Gladys Vega. If you'd stand again, Gladys, give us that wave, yes. And our Chief Operating Officer from Chelsea Collaborative, we call her Denny. I should have, Paulino. Yes, there she is. So we have been working hard and coordinating. And then the Chelsea Black community, our president, Joan Conwell. We have Phoenix Charter Academy, our head of schools, Liz Murray. Where did she go? She was, very good. And we have from the neighborhood developers, our community engagement director and community engagement manager, Jose Irahata. That was good? Okay, so we're learning. Yes. And from our Youth and Young Adult Coalition, we have Brian Lee, Jenny Lee, Benjamin Adeyinka, and Ruth Adeyinka. Yes, right over there. And I know we were going to get Metro Credit Union. I don't know if Charlene, the vice president okay, stand, let us see you. Yes. And we have some Rotarians here in the place. David Granada. Are there some other Rotarians that are here? David, raise your hand. Okay. And I don't know if so I know we have some visitors, some distinguished visitors from the Housing Court. If you want to just wave your hand and let us see you. Oh, yeah. All right, good representation. And we have our City Council Executive Director, Lydia Coco. Would you raise your hand? Yes. And did everyone get a copy of our little program that we have? We want you to have that because we want you to know that on the back page, all of the agencies and that are supporting us, the City of Chelsea, the Collaborative, the New Life Church, ROCA, CBC, Police, Neighborhood Developers, Phoenix, Harbor Cove. Did I miss Harbor Cove? Juan. Harbor Cove. All right. Raise your hand. Okay, yes. Capic, we have Gladys, Agneta. All right. And who else is from the Capic that's here? Oh, Henry. Okay, sorry. And then we also have Green Roots. Anyone from Green Roots here? But they support us as well. Okay, yes. Great. All right. So those, and the best part about it all is even as we have acknowledged these distinguished persons who serve our city and who serve our state, and we will officially introduce the Chief Justice. But guess who we are missing in that lineup? Okay, well, I should say People's A&B Church. Okay, People's A&B Church, yes, all right. But who we are missing is all of you, all the young people. Let us give a round of applause for those who have shown. Let us give a round of applause for all of the residents. Who are the residents that are here? Yes, you are all special, the residents of Chelsea. And everyone who is gathered here tonight, you are distinguished and you are special. And so we are happy that you are part of this. So now, without any further ado, we will ask our wonderful, our gracious, just popular, charismatic leader of this wonderful city, Chelsea, our beloved community. Let us welcome City Manager Tom Ambrosino.
It's really my honor to be able to formally introduce our guest speaker, Chief Justice Gans. We're really lucky. It's not often that the head of the entire judicial branch comes out to speak to local residents and community groups. So very thankful for the chief to taking his time. And I know that you're going to find his talk very interesting and informative. I will tell you, I've known Chief Justice Gans for a long, long time. And not only is he a brilliant, brilliant judge, and he truly is, but much more important than that, much more important, he is a first-class individual. He is a decent and empathetic leader of that branch, and those kind of leaders are in short supply today. Yes. So. Of the chief's formal background, and then I'm going to bring him up. He was appointed as Chief Justice of the Supreme Judicial Court by former Governor Deval Patrick back in July of 2014. So he's been the Chief Justice and the head of the judicial branch in the Commonwealth for almost 5 years. Before that, he spent 5 years on that same court as one of the 6 associate justices. Prior to that, he was a judge in one of the lower courts, the Superior Court in Massachusetts, for 11 years. So he has a lot of years of service in the judicial branch. Before becoming a judge, he held many important positions in his legal career, including as a special assistant to former FBI Director William Webster, and after that, he was in the U.S. Attorney's Office as an assistant U.S. Attorney in charge of the Public Corruption Unit. And so, without further ado, please join me in a very warm welcome for Chief Justice of the Supreme Judicial Court, Ralph D. Gans.
Thank you, Tom. What Tom did not mention to you is that you stole him away from us. He was our executive director. regretted losing him. This is where he belongs, and you are extremely fortunate to have him. I will tell a Tom Ambrosino story before I begin, so I will embarrass him from the beginning. When Tom actually applied for the job, at that time he was the mayor of Revere. The thing which I remember most about the interview is advice which I have taken to this day, and that is that Tom said that at the beginning of each year, he would identify the 4 or 5 things which are most important to accomplish during the course of that year. And at the end of every week, he would go back and determine, what have I done to advance each of those 5 goals? It is an extraordinarily wise man who tries to get past the day-to-day emergencies and keeps his eye on what is the big picture, and you are very fortunate to have Tom as your city manager. But I'm here not to speak only about Tom and about your wonderful police chief, Chief Kais. I'm here to speak about the rule of law and also to speak as to how that matters to this community. I'm going to begin. I know that the rule of law is what people have been speaking about, both because it is right now at risk, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. And it's a term of art which we often use and don't really understand. The best way that I know to explain the rule of law is to tell you about a constitution that I know about. It is a constitution that guarantees the rights of all citizens, regardless of nationality or race, in all spheres of economic, cultural, social, and political life. It is a constitution which guarantees the freedom of religious worship and the freedom from anti-religious propaganda. It is a constitution which guarantees freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom of assembly. The constitution that I have just described is the constitution of the former Soviet Union, written in 1936 under the leadership of Joseph Stalin. And to any of you who know even a little bit of history, you know that that constitution was a farce, that none of those rights actually in any way were delivered. And I speak of the Soviet Constitution of 1936 to prove a point, which is that without an independent judiciary that has the authority and the courage to speak truth to power and to ensure that what is said in the Constitution actually has meaning, the Constitution is merely a piece of paper. The freedoms that all of us enjoy in our Constitution, and I remind you that we have 2 constitutions in Massachusetts, the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Massachusetts with its Declaration of Rights. And if Chief Justice Marshall were here, she would tell you that our Constitution is older than the United States Constitution, written by John Adams in 1780, but she's not here, so I will do that for her. And we depend upon our courts to speak to the rule of law and to ensure that those constitutional rights are more than a piece of paper. That which distinguishes our Constitution from the Constitution of the Soviet Union is not so much the rights they give, but the extent to which our courts are going to allow us to enforce those rights. That is what we mean by the rule of law. Not the words on a piece of paper, not the promises of a constitution, but the extent to which you can go to court and have those rights enforced against a government that may be oppressing and violating those rights. That is what the rule of law truly means. Let me speak to you about a number of things which are less lofty than the rule of law, and they are the kind of issues which face this community. And I should say it is a great pleasure for me to be in this community because I have heard so much about this community because you have been leaders in so many things that I care about. The Chelsea Collaborative was a leader in helping us to put together a statewide housing court. You were one of the first community organizations that came together and brought others on board to build the coalition that allowed us to bring a housing court to every community in Massachusetts. ROCA was one of the first agencies that helped young adults wonderful thing because there are so many resources which are available to us, more than any of us recognize. And as important as collaboration is extremely challenging because collaboration requires us to spend a lot of time talking to each other and working together and compromising and doing all the things which sound easy but we know are very, very difficult to do. And no one has done it better than Chelsea. And one of the things which we are trying to do statewide, and I'm going to speak for a moment about the challenges we have of opiate addiction throughout Massachusetts, throughout the nation, is what we aspire to do in our courts and are aspiring to do throughout Massachusetts is something that Chelsea has already begun to do through its hub. I would like there to be in every community something akin to a hub which will provide what I refer to as touch point opportunities. For every time in which a person who has an opiate issue touches any part of the medical system, police, the criminal justice system, I think each of those touch points should provide us with an opportunity to furnish help. Whether it be an overdose, whether it be an arrest by a police officer, whether it be somebody who has not been attending school, and the answer is because the person has had various issues related to drugs, whether it's a family issue which may come to a family court, whether it's an arrest, whether it's a release from jail, each of those provide us with an opportunity to do something to help that individual to address their opiate issues, arguably their mental health issues, since we know that many, many persons who are facing opiate issues are also facing mental health issues, and to be able also to help them get get their education, get a job, get a mentor, get back on their feet. We are now focused on a whole set of challenging issues in our criminal justice system, ones which, to be honest, we're still working through. Issues to have medically assisted treatment. And as you know, there are many institutions which are resisting the idea that medical assisted treatment is appropriate for those who are suffering from addiction. I will confess to you that I take blood pressure medication. And there are people who could say to me, you should eat better, and you should exercise more, and you should attempt to do things without taking drugs that will assist you in helping you to deal with your blood pressure problem. But the fact of the matter is that I do need the blood pressure medication, and that there are others who are facing different types of problems in terms of opiate issues which themselves may need medication, individual mental health issues who may need medication. We need to take away the stigma involved in persons taking medication. If it helps, whether it be to reduce blood pressure, to reduce anxiety or other issues of mental health, or to help individuals to become functional despite their opiate addictions, those are things which we need to encourage. And we also need to recognize the challenges which every judge is facing with regard to the issue of relapse. We all know that just as anybody who's seeking to give up cigarettes is going to fail and fail and fail again until they may succeed, we recognize and need to recognize that individuals who are dealing with opiate addiction are going to fail at times. And our courts now are trying to deal with the balance between trying to recognize the fact that relapse is part of recovery and also the fact that we want individuals to be encouraged to do things which they need to do. And we are still working through those issues, and I expect that our panel perhaps will provide me with some guidance, and I look forward to both hearing from you and speaking to you. We are a court system which is more diverse than it used to be, but not as diverse as we would like it to be. And that is the case throughout our system. We've made progress, but we've not made as much progress as we know we need to, and that is especially with regard to judges and clerks. And we know we also have made progress, but need to make more in order to be more culturally competent, to be more understanding of the challenges which people are facing when they come to our clerk's offices, whether it be challenges of language, challenges because those persons are undocumented and are fearful that their coming to court may increase the chances that they will be picked up by ICE. The challenges for some of religion, for those who are Muslim who may have customs in terms of women shaking hands, which we some extent to diminish the obstacles that people face when they're convicted for a crime to get back on their feet, and have done some to reduce the role of minimum mandatory sentencing, which I have long opposed as infringing upon the rights of judges to be able to provide a fair and appropriate sentence for persons. So we are making strides, but we're not where we need to be. And I'm going to stop for a moment, and I'm going to an appropriate place to be in a church to invoke a prayer from an unknown reverend. These are the words often used by the Reverend Martin Luther King. But they were not his words. They were words from an itinerant preacher of the 19th century. And they are words which I think of often, which is, Lord, we ain't where we need to be. We ain't where we ought to be. But thank you, Lord, we ain't where we were. And and with that, I will sit and I'll be prepared to listen to our panel and do my best to answer whatever questions you may have. Thank you so much.
He's so amenable. That's wonderful. So we are. Thank you, Chief Justice. That those words were good, and now we are ready to begin our panel discussion or conversation. So I would like to, as the moderator, we have given the guidance to our team that we are to state the issue, and we're going to try to manage this very well, so we won't have state one issue, give our personal testimony, and then whatever the solution or the question to the Chief Justice will be, that is how we will proceed. So we will start with our panelists, and we will start with, let me introduce our panel. So we have from the Chelsea Black community, Henry Wilson, and from Chelsea Collaborative, yes, let's give him a hand. And from Chelsea Collaborative, it's Eswaldo? Right, and Denny, why are you back there? And our young people representative from the community is Fatima Malara. Yes. And our community member, Claudia Diaz. And then to my right, our agency representatives is Jose Rojada, TND, Juan Camilo Mendez from Harbor Cove, Phoenix Charter Academy, Liz Murray, and none other than from the Chelsea Police Department, Officer Samuel Mahmoud. And I do want to make a correction and an observation. I made a mistake. I did not acknowledge those who are from our probation court here. And so our probation officer, Carmen, wave your hand so we can know who you are, Ortiz, and Jessica, Jessie, yes, and the little young one, I forgot the name, I'm sorry. And also we have members from, the Chief Justice mentioned the hub, and we have some members from our hub, and we just want to acknowledge them and all the hard work that they have been doing in this community. Okay, so we would like to begin with, we will begin with Henry. If you could begin. And 5 minutes or less. State the issue, your story, question, solution.
All right.
And do we have our recorder? We have our recorder present, okay. And we also have, where is my timekeeper? 5 minutes. Where's my timekeeper? Okay, good. I need to have eye contact. Okay, let's go.
Good evening, Chief Gant. Thank you for coming to Chelsea. There is so much inequity in the world. The last place where there should be inequity is in the court system. But sadly, it is the first and the worst for inequitable treatment. I have a double whammy here for you, Chief. One thing is the black male. Odds of being hired in our court system are already increased due to the race, but I'm now faced with a double whammy of not being hired because we are not bilingual. Black candidates for court jobs with many years of work experience are not being hired over a bilingual candidate with no experience. That's my double whammy. So the question is, what can we do, or what can the court do to not just overlook people with experience, but to look at people as a candidate that qualifies for a position to help them go further in the court system?
Okay, thank you. We are trying to increase our numbers both in terms of African Americans as well as bilingual. And it would be a shame if the view was I recognize there may be instances in which there could be only 2 candidates, one African American and one bilingual. And it may appear that way. We are looking to increase our numbers with regard to both. As to the bilingual, the fact of the matter is our clerk's offices are dealing with many, many individuals who don't speak English, and we need, especially in the clerk's offices with regard to probation, to have an increased number of persons who are bilingual. But we also need persons of color in all respects. So I hear you. I can understand why there may be times in which a person, African American, would be passed up for a person who is bilingual. I certainly do not want to discourage our courts from hiring people who are bilingual. When I visit a court and I go to a clerk's office, the first question I ask is how many of the people on your staff speak Spanish or Portuguese, because in many communities that is a substantial minority or even a majority of the individuals who are coming there. But I also look around and I need to make sure that we have individuals of color, because first of all, that is the right thing to do, but it also is the smart thing to do, whether it be in probation or in the clerk's offices. And I know that we have, especially with regard to our clerk's offices, many miles to go in that regard. So it has not gone unnoticed. It is a work in progress, and I know that we're not yet there.
Muy buenas tardes, Su Excelencia. Mi nombre es Esperanza Escobar, soy miembro de la colaborativa de Chelsea. Yo vivo en esta ciudad de Chelsea desde hace 11 años y desde entonces yo me he involucrado mucho con la comunidad, soy voluntaria de la colaborativa y de CELA, por lo cual he estado involucrada tanto como con la comunidad hispana, como a pesar de que no tengo el idioma del inglés, soy voluntaria también de la comunidad de las personas sobre la adicción.
Good evening, Your Honor. My name is Esperanza Escobar. I live in the city of Chelsea, and I am of Colombian descent. I live here, and I am involved in the community, and I volunteer in the community. And one of the areas that I do a lot of work in is the area of addiction.
Hoy voy a exponer 3 casos específicamente, que es en lo que he estado más involucrada últimamente.
Today, I will talk about 3 different issues of which I have been highly involved in.
Tenemos el caso en la colaborativa de una señora que hizo un préstamo de $50,000 a otra persona y tiene su documento que fue registrado este préstamo, y por el hecho de ella ser indocumentada no ha podido ir a la corte porque es la amenaza que primero recibe.
So we have the first case of someone who was involved with a contract in the amount of $50,000. However, because she is undocumented, she has not been able to go forward in trying to collect the debt that's owed to her because of the fear of her status.
Y tengo otra historia de otro compañero también de la colaborativa que también era ha sido abusado en cuestión de la vivienda, amenaza por las gangas, y igual también se atemorizó, a pesar de que tenía esta amenaza de que le iban a matar. Él prefería aguantarse eso y sufrir eso por temor igual de ir a la corte.
The other issue is a housing-related matter in which someone was threatened and even threatened with death as a result of some of the housing issues that they were dealing with. And again, as a result of their immigration status, very scared to go forward and go to court to seek help.
Y en lo personal, yo pertenecía a una iglesia que éramos un grupo más o menos de 70 personas, el cual teníamos un líder, porque no puedo decir que es un pastor porque no hay que generalizar, alguien que estaba como una persona impostor, pero se hacía pasar por pastor, y el caso fue que robó todos los diezmos de la iglesia y se desapareció. Igual la comunidad, mis compañeras, mi congregación, yo este caso lo llevé a la colaborativa.
The other issue is a personal one that I experienced when having to do with a religious congregation that I belonged to, where there was about 70 of us that belonged to this congregation, and the person that portrayed themselves as the pastor basically stole all of the donations that were being made to the church, and that is something as well that I experienced.
Donde fueron $140,000 que despojaron a estas personas, son personas centroamericanas.
It was approximately $140,000, and it was mainly from a large population of Central Americans that belonged to this congregation.
Y personas trabajadoras, honestas, que tienen inclusive hasta 2 trabajos, cumplen con todas las leyes. El único delito es que no tienen documentos.
And these people are very hardworking people, honest people who just work very hard, and their only fault is that they are undocumented.
Por lo cual ellos no han podido pisar la corte, sino que, como dice la detective Gladys, ellos tienen que visitarse a la casa donde nos congregamos o algún apartamento diferente por temor de ir a la corte.
And so we don't go to the court. We meet with Gladys oftentimes in our homes because of the fear of going into the court due to the immigration status.
Como repito, y el delito más grande que tienen ellos es no tener documentos y pensar que si pisan la corte, lo primero que tienen el gran temor es que van a encontrar inmigración ahí.
Again, their biggest crime being that they are here without documentation, and so their major concern and fear is that if they step foot in the courthouse, that immigration will detain them.
Y no solo allí, sé que pasa en muchos otros lugares de estos donde abusan de la comunidad y de la fe del inmigrante.
And so these are just some of the examples, but this is, the examples that go to show the violation of the trust of the immigrant community.
Y mi pregunta es, ¿cómo o qué debemos hacer para darle confianza a estas personas para que...
And so my question is, how or what can we do to help instill trust in these individuals so that
para que vuelvan a tener esa confianza que teníamos hace unos años atrás, donde se podía asistir con confianza y recibir, o sea, esa dirección y cumplir con las leyes.
And so just really looking to see how do we build that trust so that the people can seek redress and follow the law.
Y que respeten los derechos de las personas, si sean indocumentadas o cualquier otra situación que tenga, que sean respetadas.
And so that the rights of the individuals, even if they are undocumented, are respected.
Y esa es mi gran preocupación. Muchísimas gracias.
That is one of my biggest concerns, so thank you.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the translation, Ruth. That is one of my biggest concerns, and I wish I had more power to do what needs to be done. But ICE, as you know, is a federal agency. We have urged ICE to treat our courthouses the way they treat churches, which is as a sanctuary. But they have not agreed to do that. So I cannot bar ICE from our courthouse, nor have we chosen to do so. And I am enormously concerned about the types of issues that you have identified, issues of individuals taking advantage of those who are undocumented. You identified a couple of examples. I'm aware of others in terms of wage theft, of persons who are not paying minimum wage or other obligations of employees, and those persons are being fearful to be able to invoke their rights. I'm also mindful of the concerns of individuals who are the victims of domestic violence, who are afraid to go to court. The best that I can tell you is that if one goes to court, nobody in the courthouse will ask you whether you are documented or not. That is not a question any court employee will ask you. It is not a question any judge will ask you. And our court officers have been directed to neither help nor hinder ICE with regard to their duties. So they are not permitted to be able to identify individuals as undocumented and in any way to reach out to ICE in order to interfere with your ability to come to court. I am quite mindful of the fact that there are many different types of obstruction of justice, and one of the ways in which I worry about justice being obstructed is making individuals fearful of being able to invoke their rights. And I would love to be able to say that the courts are in a position to protect you if ICE were to seek to apprehend you, but I do not have that authority to do so. At the same time, I do encourage persons who have their rights to be challenged to actually do come to court. I do think that the fear of ICE in terms of their presence in the courthouse may be greater than the reality. You will educate me today as to whether that is the case in Chelsea, but I do know that there is enormous fear out there, but the numbers of individuals, number of stories we have heard are more than I would like, but not as many as one would think. And all I can say is that nothing that will happen in the courthouse will increase your likelihood of being apprehended by ICE, except for the fact that you are going to be listed as a person who is appearing in our court, and if they know who you are and are seeking to find you, they could potentially come to court and do that. But it is not anything which we encourage. In fact, it's something that we do discourage, and it's a matter that has been of enormous concern to us. So if you wanted to elect me president, I could do more about it. But right now, I'm not here to announce my candidacy. been concerned about the issue which you have identified for the last 2 years. And I wish that we could do more. As you might know, our court ruled in a case that the police do not have the authority to hold somebody for 48 hours because ICE would like the police to cooperate with them. There is no authority under state law for someone to be arrested for being undocumented, and unless the legislature gives the police that authority, they are not able to hold any individual out of cooperation for ICE. There's no indication that the legislature intends to provide the police with that authority. But that is pretty much the extent to which our court, with regard to the interpretation of state law, has been able to act with regard to it. But it is a matter of enormous concern and continuing concern. And I expect also a matter of continuing concern to the chief, because the fact of the matter is that responsible police chiefs recognize that there is nothing more important than the cooperation of the community to solve crimes. And I'm sure that the concerns and the fears which you have mentioned are exactly what are very often thwarting the chief and the DAs from being able to prosecute the crimes that they would like to prosecute. So this is a problem shared not only by the courts, but by the police, and I'm sure if your DA were here, I'm sure she would say the same thing.
Pastor Willie, I was supposed to ask one question. I was told I'm asking 2 questions. Can I ask the second question? Yeah, you can.
Hi. So I'm actually a DACA recipient, so I am undocumented, and I have heard you passing that bill. My question is a little bit different though. As a senior in high school 4 years ago, we actually had a student who was murdered. He was into gangs, and he actually died in a beer. He was murdered during a drive-by. And as class president, the whole community felt for it. He was really nice. The only thing he didn't have was the support from teachers, because he didn't have enough resources dealing with gang violence within school. So I would meet with him after school. I would tutor him in classes so he could pass. But a week before he died, he actually dropped out, which was really sad. But we would still be in contact. And seeing this 4 years later, it's still a prevalent issue within the school. However, the school doesn't have enough funding for resources, and that is my biggest concern coming here right now. I know that obviously school funding is done through the state level, but I would just like to ask the question of how can we say that we have education, equal education for all, when we don't have enough resources to keep students within the school system.
Thank you for that question. That, as you recognize, is a legislative issue, and one which I know is before the legislature. At the same time, you raise an issue which I don't think is spoken of nearly enough, which is that persons speak of poorer communities in terms of having diminished resources and increasing challenges in the schools in terms of the number of persons who do not speak English, the number of persons who may be from single-parent families, the number of persons who may be homeless, and the additional financial burdens that appropriately should place in the school to provide the education necessary for it. Very few speak about the challenges involved in having individuals who are often the victims of crime and the type of trauma which that means for other individuals and all that that holds. And you have identified that as one more reason for those communities to have the additional resources, because the problems, sadly, the type of problems you identify in wealthier communities, it's not so much drive-bys or drug busts gone bad, but it's individuals individuals who were dying from opiate addiction. Sadly, the presence of death among high school students or recent graduates has become one which has occurred throughout Massachusetts. And I know it has affected almost every community, and I think it is important that you help our legislature to recognize that those are issues in terms of mental health treatment and counseling and guidance, which should be considered as they begin to conduct their allocation of school funding.
Hi, good evening. My name is Claudia Diaz. I'm a community member. I've been in the United States since I was 6 years old. I just turned 45. I'm a detainee from ICE. I had done 4 months at the House of Correction over at South Bay. When I was released on November 1st, I was in front of the judge who had told me that all my other cases had been dropped and I was released. Once I was released from Chelsea Courthouse, no sooner did I step my foot out of the courthouse, ICE detained me. My concern is, as you can all see, I speak very good English. I was taken from Chelsea Courthouse, transported to Burlington, booked, fingerprints, pictures, everything. And then released at my own recognizance in Burlington, Massachusetts, where ICE took me to the Burlington Mall, gave me a $5 bill, and said, "We'll see you at your next court date." Now, my concern is, me being an individual who's been here since I was 6 years old, not only did I complete high school, I completed college. I've been a member of the Chelsea community since I was 13 years old, working with the collaborative all the way up to school-based health centers and working for partners. And here I am, dropped off at a Burlington Mall with $5 to find my way back to where I reside. Where is it that we can help our community to help them, not only with having our lawyers and our judicial system take care of us, but how can an individual be able to speak freely, not only to our police officers, but also to our justice system, in the fear that, here I am, what's going to happen to me come when I go back to court in July? This is a really big concern. Like I said, I speak very good English. I was able to get myself from Burlington back to Chelsea. What happens to all of our other immigrants who are not able to speak for themselves and have no advocacy to help them?
The issue you raise is one which I have been thinking about, because we do, although we are a state court, we do occasionally deal with immigration issues. My English is pretty good too. And I actually went to law school, and I've been practicing law now for 30 years. But when I attempt to understand the federal immigration laws, it is an enormous challenge for me and for my colleagues and for my law clerks. And I cannot imagine how anybody who does not speak English, or they speak English, has not had a law degree or received training, could possibly navigate their way through the immigration system. It speaks, I know that there has been efforts in Boston and Somerville to provide additional funds for counsel for individuals in immigration. The fact of the matter is, a sad fact, is that of course there's no right to counsel in immigration court, but those who have counsel do better at an extraordinary level than those who do not. There is a need for all communities to begin to help and gather up, and I know that the legal community has been quite terrific in terms of providing pro bono legal assistance, but the importance of having counsel to assist persons like you or children who are here, often separated from their families, and being faced with the possibility of being returned to a country which risks the possibility California referred to immigration court. She's a judge. She referred to immigration court as having essentially death penalty cases in a traffic court context. She was aware that she was adjudicating, deciding issues of life and death for individuals as to whether they should be going back to Guatemala or Honduras or other places where they face a substantial risk of death if they were to err, and they're doing so without the benefit of counsel in a court system which is terribly chaotic. Again, those are matters which are federal, not matters which are state, but they certainly are matters that I am well aware of, and we in the Access to Justice community have been working hard to increase the numbers of persons who are providing legal assistance to immigrants.
All right. Got me again, Chief Gill.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, the second question that I was asked to ask is second chances. Blacks with a history of a criminal record cannot get a second chance in the workforce. What type of assistance is available? Where can we go for this group of individuals to have the opportunity for a second chance?
Thank you for that question. It's one which we've been spending a great deal of time, not only with regard to African Americans, but with regard to all. And we still have our probation folks in the back there. We are working to have our probation system be a place of second chances. And by that, I mean a place in which individuals can be furnished with the help that they may need to get back on their feet, which may mean help in terms of getting a high set or getting back to school, help with regard to job training, help with regard to getting the driver's license that you might need to be able to get to work and keep a job. And we are even working to develop a mentoring program so that persons who do not have mentors in the community could have other persons who could help them to navigate individuals who've been in prison for a while, come into a world which they don't entirely understand, and the manner in which they adapted to prison life is not necessarily going to be terribly successful when they return to the community. So one story which I was told is about an individual who said, when I was in prison and I was in line waiting for food and somebody pushed me from behind, the appropriate response is to make sure you push back very hard, because if you let that person take advantage of you, the next push may involve a shiv. But that's not the appropriate course of action if you're in line at the CVS. And trying to learn how to readapt to life outside of prison is one which we know requires a great deal of help. It is something that we are committed to changing the role of probation. Probation is often viewed as a place in which they, what was the phrase, that they monitor you, they tail you, they nail you, they jail you. And indeed, probation does do a little bit of that for individuals who are recommitting crimes. But we are working to create a probation system which is going to be a place of second chances. So everything that we've been working on with regard to reducing the level of recidivism is focused on second chances. It's a recognition that if we give up on individuals, we become poorer as a commonwealth. I often tell the story, that if basically Bill Belichick had to end the season with the same number of persons he began the season with, he'd have to be a lot more careful to not lose individuals to injury or whatever else, because he would say, I need all 62 of those guys. And the fact of the matter is we can't afford to lose persons ourselves. One bit of good news, apart from the fact that we are reimagining what probation is that there is a shortage of employees, and that persons now are looking for individuals who before they may not have taken a good hard look at. Sadly, one of the reasons they are doing so is because they are increasingly reluctant to hire persons who are undocumented or immigrants for those jobs. unfortunate fact of life, but it does provide an opportunity for those persons who've been involved in the criminal justice system to have employers who may otherwise not have given them a hard look to attempt to give them an opportunity. So there are good things happening. I'm well aware of the challenges most of the criminal justice reform has been facing, has been looking precisely at the concept of a second chance.
Now we will turn to our agency representatives. Are there any responses that you may have regarding what has already been shared, or anything, another issue that we can be specific about?
Okay. Sorry about that. So I'm Liz Murray. I'm the principal at Phoenix Charter Academy, and I'd love to follow up on that thread of conversation about reimagining what probation might be. We work with a significant number of court-involved youth at our school and have done a tremendous amount of work to reimagine what high school could be, moving away from more traditional and punitive practices to more restorative practices and trauma-informed approaches, given that it's our firm belief that change does not happen. A person is not motivated to make profound change by punishment and correction. A person is motivated to make profound change and take the risks involved with that through healing of the spirit, affirmation of identity, and access to opportunities. And so I'd love to hear you be even a little bit more specific as you share some of the conversations that are happening about reimagining what probation could be, and then also rethinking practices regarding court-involved youth and their experiences with the current justice system.
Happy to. Let me first discuss the issue of youth. Our juvenile court has been focused for a number of years on what people know to be the school-to-prison pipeline. And there has actually been substantial progress. The numbers of juveniles who are facing delinquency actions in our courts is greatly diminished over the course of time. I think it's down about 30 or 40%. And why is that happening? It's happening because some of the same conduct that would have triggered a delinquency complaint now is being handled in a different way. So there is a recognition of that. There is progress being made. I love each of my 7 trial court departments, but when I go to spend time with juvenile court judges, it is quite a special thing because they really do think of each person who comes before them as their kids, and they are very mindful of that. So the fact of the matter is police are doing fewer delinquency complaints. I expect that's probably the case here in Chelsea. The chief nods his head. It's not only progressive police chiefs like this chief who are doing that. I think that is happening throughout the state. There is the concept of managing to diminish the school-to-prison pipeline is one which people are beginning to get. I know that the Boston Bar Association has made school suspensions a priority and has been trying to provide counsel and individuals to assist persons who are now facing with suspensions, with the view that if you're already behind in school, being suspended for a week and missing a week of school makes you only further behind, and it becomes quite hopeless at some point to be able to catch up, and you say it's hopeless, so I'm just going to drop out. And everybody's poorer for that, so there's recognition as to that. In terms of what we're trying to do for probation, I just spent an hour with the probation commissioner yesterday morning with regard to changes that are going on in pretrial. Before pretrial, that is when you were arrested and you were released on bail, it was generally dead time. Nothing terribly good was going to happen to you, so if you had a drug issue or had a mental health issue, nothing was likely to happen until you were adjudicated and placed on probation, and then they could provide you with services. Right now, we have the ability to be able to give individuals a running start from that, to be able to provide them corrections with a variety of services and to allow individuals from that point of arraignment to begin to get those services so that they can have a running start towards one of two results. If they get a running start that is successful enough that the DA may say, you've done everything that we hope you're going to be doing, and we're not going to try to screw it up by sending you to jail. So if you manage to complete what you're doing over the course of the last 6 months or a year, we're likely to drop the charges or give you probation so that we don't interfere with the success that you've shown. Or if the crime you've committed is too serious to justify that, your attorney can go to the judge and say, Your Honor, my client's done all the stuff you want him to be doing, and please consider that when you consider what sentence is appropriate. So we're trying to make sure that pretrial is not dead time, that it's being used. It is still a work in progress because it requires judges to understand what is available, and it requires defense counsel to be willing to, and there's a concern that defense counsel may be reluctant to have their individuals start something in which they may fail and fear that they're going to find themselves worse off. So that education process is very much in work. So that's an example of what we're trying to do with regard to it. It arose from a change in legislation as part of the criminal justice reform. And it's one which we are trying to make work. It's literally only a few months old, so it is still a work in progress, and probation hopefully is hard at work to make that a reality.
Would anyone else like to speak?
There we go. So, thank you, Chief Justice, for being with us here today. I wanted to follow up on a thread that a couple of people, Kelly and Esperanza, mentioned about the presence of ICE in our courtrooms, in our community, and I want to think a little bit more about what we can do, or what the courts can do, or how we can sort of come at some solution. Obviously, we're aware that the court didn't particularly like the solution advocates proposed last year of the public counsel, the writ barring ICE from entering courts. But I feel like there are still things that we can think about, and things that we can do, even if it's not an actual grant saying you're not allowed to come inside. I think we could follow the examples of many states around the country, like California, Oregon, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Connecticut, where courts have actually sent formal letters to ICE declaiming, please stay out. This is asking ICE, demanding ICE to designate it a sensitive location. ICE has a sensitive location policy that they, as you mentioned, only use with respect to churches, not with respect to courts. I'm also thinking of how, because as you very correctly mentioned, one of the biggest determinants of succeeding in immigration court is having an attorney. Immigration law, as Your Honor mentioned, is a Byzantine system of nonsense, basically. I say that as an immigration attorney. I'm wondering how we can provide more access to counsel, whether we should follow the California model of more public funding for immigration attorneys, detained, non-detained for kids, as California does, or whether we can follow the model that the Chief Justice of the Second Circuit, Judge Katzmann, did, where he helped spearhead a program for fellows right out of law school to represent people in immigration court. So I guess I'm trying to think of, given that this is one of the biggest issues that affects our community, as we mentioned, the fear that it creates, as I believe Esperanza mentioned, just 3 examples right there of the fear that it creates in our community of people going to court. I think this is a problem that's worth thinking about more, as I'm sure Your Honor has already been thinking about. Thank you.
In terms of writing letters to ICE. I assure you that that request was made of ICE, and it was explored by the Conference of Chief Justices, which is the conference not only from this state, but throughout the country. And ICE pushed back and said we will limit the extent to which we do it. Whether or not they're honoring that, I do not know. But I would love to be able to tell ICE what to do, but they insist that they are a federal agency, and we do not have the authority to tell them what to do. And so, but Chief Justice Carey has met with ICE. We are trying to work with them as we can to diminish some of the concerns they have about, for instance, delivering persons who are in ICE custody to our courts so that their cases can be adjudicated. They are picking up people who are merely being arrested but have not been found guilty, and we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to come to court, to have the opportunity to be found not guilty, so that their arrests will not result in their deportation. With regard to the issue of counsel, and you are an attorney, I guess you're aware of course, PAIR and the other groups which are out there. There also are a number of senior attorneys, and increasingly our law schools are generating a new generation of attorneys who are beginning to do immigration law. Places like Justice Bridge, which is an incubator of recent law graduates, did not expect that that would be one of the areas of his practice, but that has become the fact. We are developing a core of younger immigration attorneys. The issue, of course, is going to be how they're going to be paid, and the extent to which, I know you read the Globe, I guess, yesterday about Boston and Somerville beginning to come forward. Boston has come forward with regard to some private money. The number of counsel has been markedly increasing, and the bar actually has stepped forward, but there still, again, are miles to go. We don't have the numbers in Texas or California, so we are in a better position to provide counsel than they are in those states, because they are being overwhelmed. A fair number of our attorneys actually are traveling to Texas and California to be able to provide representation. But so I share all of the concerns you've identified. I wish I could do more, both in terms of counsel and in terms of having ICE to be staying away from the courts. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not within my power.
Hello. Thank you, Honorable Judge, for coming out. And I really appreciated your, when you were speaking, you were really connecting the work that you do with other parts of the lived experience of many, and how your role is really to protect and to ensure that, the Constitution has some backing to it, and that people can have their day in court and exert their rights. But I would like to veto or agree with what the folks have said, is that we're preventing people from having the opportunity to have a day in court, but not only that, we're creating a second-class citizenship that is unable to exert their rights because of the fear of deportation, because of the fear of leaving their children behind. So by neither aiding or preventing from ICE from being in the courts, by not really taking an action, a firm action, you are taking a stance. So I would encourage you to reimagine and to take a stronger stance around that. And there's so many things that I would like to say. And for example, Henry was speaking around, the school to jail pipeline, and how African Americans have a higher rate of having a criminal record, and how that prevents them from engaging civically and from preventing them from voting. And that's the way that they can exert their rights, through the ballots, electing officials that are going to help them have access to basic social services like housing. And we're just preventing people from entering society, and we're not putting them in a situation. So I was really excited to hear that you were thinking about ways to innovate the reentry process. So thank you for speaking to that. But I really would like to piggyback on the experience that Fatima was speaking, and how teachers in our public school system, we should encourage, and one of the things that Chelsea is doing, one of the solutions that we have adopted, is to encourage participants to understand the roots of migration and to be informed around trauma-informed practices. So I was really excited to see that. And to really understand that, for example, when we say gangs in the United States, people might think of kids hanging around in the corner, but if you put it in the cultural context of many of the folks that come from Central America, you're talking about organized crime, players that have political stakes, that have created truces with the government to say, we are not going to kill this many people. And they broke that truce. So if we don't provide the people that are expected to be the authority figures in the United States with that context of the cultural background, and for them to be trauma-informed and knowledgeable about what's happening in those countries, then we're just creating a system that is really traumatizing and it's not meeting the expectations of our children. And I just want to speak also around how traumatizing the experience is of going to court, and how immigration court, which is a federal court, the perceptions associated with that in the immigrant community vary, but mostly are negative, and those translate into the Commonwealth courts, which are different. And I was really happy to hear that no one in the courts would ask for what kind of documentation you have, but they just ask you how we can better support you, exert your rights. So thank you for sharing that. But going back to the youth, and I don't want to take any more time, there is a gang database that is very biased. And if a child is wearing a certain color, they can state that they're gang associated, and that's being used in the courts, in immigration courts, in the federal system, and also a tool of FIO, interview observations, are also used in courts as evidence, and those FIOs were created to really help police, hospital, and other community stakeholders to identify points of intervention, if you will. And they have been corroded to this tool that has been used to create cases against youth. So I would encourage you to think about how the system, the immigration system, is different than the Commonwealth system, how that is permeating into the immigrant community and into the Commonwealth, and how that affects the perception, and how by not taking a stronger stance, we're letting this population down.
You made a series of important points. Let me speak to a few, which I hope is clear, but may not be. The Constitution protects not only citizens, but all residents. I never speak about the citizens of Massachusetts. I speak only about the residents of Massachusetts, because I know that there are many persons who are not citizens, but they are entitled to the same constitutional rights as citizens, and our courts are there to protect those rights, whether they be citizen or non-citizen. But the courts can only protect rights if persons come to invoke their rights and to know their rights and to present their rights. So as much as I understand the extent to which there is fear, it is also important that individuals have the courage to come forward to invoke those rights. I know it is easier for me to say that than it is for many here, because I do not need to worry that if I invoke my rights, somebody is going to bring me to an immigration facility and threaten to deport me back to Europe, where my family was in 1870. But the fact of the matter is, rights need to be invoked in order to be protected. I am mindful of the extent to which people, especially people who are not sophisticated with regard to our law, combine federal with state. They combine understand the distinction. It is important for people to recognize that our state courts are there to attempt to assist individuals, whether they have counsel or not, to understand their rights and to invoke those rights. It is meant to be a sanctuary, and I would love for it truly to be a sanctuary, but again, as I mentioned, I don't have that authority. But we have court service centers in Boston. We have been training clerks and probation officers to be mindful of these particular risks and to be aware that individuals may be acting in ways which may appear strange to them, both because they may not understand our system or because they are afraid of revealing information which they fear will come back to bite them. Those are the things which everybody in our probation office and our clerk's office are dealing with each and every day. So, as I say, it's easier for me to encourage you to invoke your rights, but the fact of the matter is, if you do not invoke your rights, there will be those who will take those rights away from you. And we will do whatever we can to protect you in the invocation of those rights. But as I say, some part of me, as I'm sitting here, says, we may want to invite to come next month the district director of ICE. The district director of ICE should be here to hear these particular concerns and see they need to hear that as well. And they need to, because that is part of the world. Maybe they would come. But I think it is important that they understand that corner of the world as well as the pressures they're getting from Washington, D.C.
So, Chief Justice, I just wanted to say thank you for coming out today and answering our residents' questions and concerns. As you can see, this is a community that really gets together, and when they have some concerns and questions, they want the answers. So, I have the pleasure of working in the city for the police department since 1998. I grew up in the city, so I love Chelsea. I love working with everybody in the community. But hopefully, you have answered their questions. As working for Chief Kais, since I've been in the department has grown. We have more women on the job, and we have a good percentage of Spanish-speaking men and women. When I first started, we had probably a few Spanish officers, probably one female officer that spoke Spanish, and now it has grown. We're up to about 110 officers, and the city of Chelsea has changed drastically since I've got on. And speaking on the police, standpoint, that crime has dropped. You don't see as many as gang-involved issues. The streets are cleaner. We have a great leader in city manager and a great leader in police department with Chief Brian Kai. So I just want to say thank you again. I want to thank the residents of the city of Chelsea for coming together, and I know when you want the answers, you come out and get them. So just thank you, and thank you for having me.
I will add one thing. When Chief Kais was introduced and the welcome he got, I couldn't help but think, wouldn't the Chief of Police of Baltimore and Chicago love to receive that reception from the community? Don't take for granted how fortunate you have to have the relationship which you have with your police force, because there are many cities which are struggling with having a very different relationship with their police force. So don't take that. No one in this room should take for granted that everybody has that same relationship and has a police department which is as committed to the community and as sensitive to the needs of the community as you have here in Chelsea.
So Sasha, would you come forward? We're going to do our question and answers here. If there are any questions from the audience.
I think housing is a very big issue. It intertwines with crime. It intertwines with being released from jail. It intertwines with all of us. Whatever your status is, whatever you look like. So what's going on is that once a person has a criminal record, they're out of subsidized housing permanently. How can people get a second chance if they're homeless? Another thing is the families are also in jeopardy. I know people, I have to be careful how I say this. I know people, I'm an elder, I work with elders, who have relatives released from jail. They do not want their son or grandson or granddaughter in the street. They bring them into their subsidized senior housing. Now, both the elder and the younger person are in jeopardy of being homeless forever. What can we do to change this?
Thank you for that question. I do ask the same question. Do we really think that someone is going to get back on his or her feet if you can't find a place to live? If you are a convicted sex offender, do you really think that the community is better off if they're homeless, which is what most sex offenders are upon their release? The issue of restrictions on housing is one of what we refer to as the collateral consequences of conviction. The legislature has made some strides with regard to it. It needs to make more. It has made it easier for individuals to keep a driver's license. It needs to make it easier for individuals to be able to keep and find their home. The discussion of housing leads me to speak about two more things. Because you have a housing court, you also now have a tenancy preservation program, which is designed to reduce the level of homelessness, especially for those who have mental health issues, and mental health issues include issues of addiction. And the tenancy preservation program was one of the reasons we were able to persuade the legislature to move to a statewide housing court, because it is so important to reduce the level of homelessness. I know that Chelsea also is very actively involved in attempting to promote a right to counsel. I have spent a fair amount of time recently understanding the enormous complexity of housing procedure. Housing court is very complicated and it goes very fast. To be able to understand and invoke your rights in the time period which you have for a process which is referred to as a summary process, because it is meant to be summary, it's meant to be quick, makes it extremely difficult for individuals who do not have the help of counsel. So I am thrilled that the Chelsea Collaborative is working with other community groups, beginning to develop support for the right to counsel, and I will do whatever I can to speak on behalf of that effort. But it's also, I think, two more things which I think matter. Chelsea is on the rise, much as East Boston is on the rise. And communities on the rise are going to find individuals who are going to begin to move in to Chelsea who are not from Chelsea and are likely, and that is probably only a matter of time before Chelsea begins to face some of the challenges which places like East Boston are facing in terms of others moving in and persons being evicted to make room for individuals who can afford to pay more for housing. We need to be able to be focused not only on getting individuals counsel, but on also being able to have the resources persons who've had a health issue or some other issue, which has meant that they have fallen behind and are now facing eviction for that reason. We need to be able, at an early point in time, before the matter reaches housing court, to be able to help those persons to be able to resolve those housing problems. The best time to resolve a housing problem is before it gets to housing court, and we're working now in the housing court to figure out how we can move after the notice to quit is filed, which is the first step towards eviction, to be able to find the money and find the resources that can enable individuals to stay in their home. And that helps not only the tenant, but it also helps the landlord. Nobody likes an eviction. So as much as there is some differences between tenants and landlords, there is some commonality in that a landlord would generally prefer to keep a tenant if that tenant is going to be able to pay his or her rent and be able to afford to remain there. So there is much that is going on, much that has been done, and I assure you the issue of housing and housing court and the complexity of housing law and attempting to make it simpler and more progressive is one that I've spent a great deal of time thinking about and will continue to do so. And we do have Ben here, who is the DCA, the Deputy Court Administrator of the Housing Court, and has been an important part of the efforts which the Housing Court has done to go statewide and to begin to address these very issues.
Any other questions?
Hi, Your Honor. Thank you so much for being here. So I just wanted to follow up on one of Jose's points that I think he brought up that's really important to me personally about FIOs, just because I'm really concerned about how children are being put into that database. A lot of times, like Jose said, it's because of the color they're wearing or because just randomly they'll be walking home from school with someone and they're put into this database. They're completely unaware that they're in this database until they get to immigration court and this gang packet is pulled out. And so it's concerning to me that ICE is getting access to this information that maybe police officers or somebody else is putting into the system not knowing where that information is going. And I work in legal services and I have clients who are detained for a really long time based on FIOs with no criminal record. And they're continuing to be detained because they're allegedly a gang member. So I'm just wondering if there's any plans or any ideas, and maybe you don't have it off the top of your head, but any type of oversight or any type of way to kind of correct this system. Because I know in states like California where there were these gang injunctions, now they do have a way for families to be able to challenge being put in the database or to be notified that they're put in the database. But as of now, families in Massachusetts have no idea if their children are being put into this database until they're detained and taken to immigration court.
There are some questions I can't answer because you mentioned the possibility of those individuals in some places going to court to seek an injunction. I believe the ACLU actually is either contemplating or has brought an action against or with regard to the Boston Police Department with regard to it. Not always, but I've been reading about that concern in the paper. Those issues arguably may come to my court, and matters that may arguably come to my court are among the few matters that I cannot offer my opinion on unless somebody say that I've already prejudged the case. So that is one I will leave alone.
The chief can probably, he can speak to it.
So I can't speak for all cities, but I can speak for Chelsea. Only because Jose brought it up about an FIO, like a field interview. That information does not go anywhere. That information is information we have here locally. That does not go to the Boston Regional Intelligence Center, the BRIC. That does not go to ICE. That stays here locally. And as far as the way someone is dressed or someone is hanging out with some people that may arguably be gang members, we don't have a database. City of Chelsea, we do not have a specific database. Again, I don't know what happens in other jurisdictions. For the most part, if someone is identified as a gang member, the reality is usually they're a self-admitted gang member. Usually some individuals that are involved in gang life are very proud of who they're affiliated with. By virtue of, we probably all have seen this at times, whether it be on television or elsewhere, with their tattoos that they have on their face, their body. very proud of the GAN Association. Again, so anything that we have just in terms of preserving public safety, enhancing public safety, we're not going to turn a blind eye if someone's involved in a violent gang. That information, certainly depending on the crime in the picture, is going to be documented in a police report. But as far as a specific database, and having that database and handing it over to the federal government, albeit ICE, on the civil side, absolutely positively we don't do it. I've heard some issues that have been raised, as the Chief Justice mentioned in Boston with the Boston PD and with the ACLU. I don't know the specifics, but I can kind of argue just knowing some of it and talking to the Commissioner and others. Usually there's more to the story. I know there's been some anecdotal cases in the newspaper in the last couple of weeks. I've got calls on the issues as well, on the issue just to comment, and I don't want to comment on something I don't really know about, but I know that, again, it seems to be more to the story. But just the notion out there that there's this double secret database that police officers see somebody with a blue shirt or a blue hat walking down the street, and we'll stop them and ask them their name and ship that off to ICE somehow so that they can intervene and look to deport the person is just not accurate. At least in this city. I can't speak for everywhere, but at least in this city. Thank you.
So I have a comment, and it's not a question, but I just want to say that I appreciate the recommendation. We have top lines invited to come on the 16th, on May 16th. So hopefully we can begin to have these conversations about immigration within the court system. I have reached out to his office. He sent the letter out. We're just waiting for the confirmation. So thank you for the recommendation.
We have time for one more question.
Quisiera saber en qué nos va a afectar en el casino, porque nos estamos subiendo las rentas demasiado caras y no solo tenemos que pagar renta, biles, más que entonces nosotros queremos preguntar qué nos pueden ayudar ustedes, porque los dueños de casa
So this question is regarding the casinos. Given that the casinos are coming in proximity, the rents are going up, and obviously we want to know what kind of support is going to be available given that the rents are increasing by the landlords.
Y también yo sé que viene una cosa más grande, que va a haber más drogas, más adicción, más gente que viene con ese casino.
The concern is, obviously with the casino, there's going to be other issues like drugs and crime and other stuff that are associated.
Quisiera que nos protegieran más a nuestros hijos, porque nosotros nos vamos a trabajar y a veces no estamos para verlos cuando se van a las escuelas a estudiar. Los días pasados yo vivo aquí enfrente y estaba viendo que mi hijo salía para afuera, pero en eso yo vi que alguien hablaba abajo y un montón de personas, y yo me vi para la ventana y cuando miré que había personas que usaban drogas, y digo yo, antes.
So the concern is mainly around our kids, right? As parents have to go to work, and so we're concerned that our children are just going to continue to be exposed to a lot of these things that are going to come as a result of the casino. The other day, for example, I live nearby, and my child was outside, and I looked outside, and I realized that there were people outside who were drug users.
Estaba yo ese día para verlo, pero cuando yo ahorita ya empieza mi temporada y no tengo que salir a trabajar, y entonces, ay, no sé cómo va a ser ahora cuando me vaya a trabajar.
So concern is, luckily I was there that day, to see what was happening and watch over my child, but what happens when I'm not there, when I have to go to work? And as a result of these, the casino and the different changes that will come with it, these issues are going to increase.
There's one person who I'm sure has given a great deal of thought to the issue of the casino and the rising rents. He's sitting in front of me, so.
So it really is not a question that the Chief Justice can help with. They are concerns that the city is taking very seriously. So we all know the casino is going to open, presumably in June. We're prepared that there are going to be some impacts on the city of Chelsea, not all of which are positive. Housing is one of them that we've been concerned about. Crime is another. So with respect to housing, we've been working pretty diligently the last couple of years to try to improve upon the number of affordable units that we have here in Chelsea. We have added to our local ordinances and a requirement that when someone builds new housing in Chelsea, a portion of that is set aside to be affordable units that can be that are within reach of people who actually make the income that residents of Chelsea make. We just were advocating for a new development that's going to hopefully come to Chelsea that will be all affordable apartments. So this issue that the Chief mentioned of gentrification, rising rents, people who live here being priced out of the city is one that we take very seriously. The community groups like the Collaborative take seriously, and we've been working together with them to advocate for more affordable housing. In terms of potential crime impacts that the casino might bring, that's something that I know the Chief and I have been very concerned about. You know, we will be keeping our eye on whether those impacts occur. Naturally, we're hoping that they won't, but if they do, we will be prepared for it, both in terms of putting more resources to the police department if they need them, and in terms of working with the state agency that oversees the casino, the State Gaming Commission, to demand more resources, which could lead to more police officers on the street if those negative impacts occur. So, I just want to say thank you to the Chief. I know we're wrapping up, but Chief, we really appreciate your patience. You've really heard a lot from our community. These obviously are real concerns that people of Chelsea have, but you've been so gracious to listen and to offer your best answers and advice to us. And I just want to say on behalf of Chelsea, I know I speak to everyone, to just thank you very much for taking the time to spend so much time.
Thank you for taking your time to help me understand the
Thank you. And so with that, Chelsea, we want to thank everybody and all of the organizations and New Life Church and all of their staff and everybody for being a part of this. But this is not the last. This is not the end, because we came out and we have voiced our concerns. Chief Justice, the Honorable, gave us the comments and what all of his positions are. So do we have in this room a call to action where we want to do follow-up and be more specific in terms of finding what it is that we can do together as a community? Is there anyone in here who are ready to do that, to move forward with that? Raise your hand. Yeah? Yeah. Okay. So stay tuned. This shall come forward.